I'd like to move on to another question, which is around vaccines. So this is
Yeah.
specifically post-transplant for very severe AA, still with a low immune system, and having IV immunoglobulins twice a month. But I think that this probably is a topic which I've certainly has come up, discussed and has come up quite a few times and generally across our community. So do you know if and when we're able to have a vaccine for COVID, when it might become available, where it is, and what are the risks of having it if we're allowed to have it, and any indication of how the vaccine tests are going, and if they're very likely to work in the cases of
So
aplastic anemia patients?
I think you'll know as much as I do. Um, so, so taking those questions one by one, when will we have one? Well, I know as much as what yourselves know, which is that we're praying for one to happen as soon as possible. Some people think it might be December. Most people think it would be early next year sometime. We just don't know. The problem is that it's dependent upon what's called phase 3 studies. So phase 3 studies are where you have huge numbers of patients in principle randomized to, say, we call a placebo, in this case the control arms getting meningitis vaccine, and then the other half are getting the coronavirus vaccine. And you then follow those patients up, one, to see side effects, and two, to go and see whether it works or not. So is it, for example, that the patients who get the coronavirus vaccine, not the patients, but those who've been recruited onto the study, the half who get the coronavirus vaccine, how less likely are they to get coronavirus compared to those who get, for example, the meningitis or whatever control vaccine? And those studies are going on at the moment, both in the UK, and the Oxford vaccines, as you know this, probably in South Africa and Brazil. And we just have to wait and see. And I haven't had any more information about that. The Oxford group published their phase 1 study. That was a huge study, phase 1, phase 2. It's about 1,000 patients, I think, 1,000 people, so I keep saying patients. Just to put that into context, all the other phase 1 studies, so the Americans have published theirs, the Chinese have, are in far fewer numbers. So the US group was about 40, 50 patients. The very first Chinese study was about 40, 50. They've subsequently put, I think, another study of several hundred. The UK one was huge. I mean, it's absolutely massive. What it showed was that their vaccine approach uses, it's a modified, what's called chimpanzee adenovirus. So it's a bit like a cold virus. And they take this chimpanzee cold virus and they take out all the stuff that could cause us to become unwell. And but it still has this sort of outer shell of that virus, which allows it to do the basic stuff. So it can get into our bodies and it can replicate. There's a part of there for protein of the coronavirus, which is actually inserted into that chimpanzee virus. And so what that virus does is it causes it to be expressed, this protein. It's a spike protein. So the coronavirus it's got lots of spikes on it. And this chimpanzee virus causes that spike protein to be expressed in our bodies. And then our immune system recognizes that and starts to form antibodies to that. So that phase 1 study showed that those people who got that coronavirus Oxford vaccine were able to mount antibodies and also, crucially, T-cell responses. So now, having shown that to be successful, they've gone into the phase 3 study. In terms of the side effects, and this is published, it was published in the Lancet, the commonest side effects, it's quite common, a lot of people got fever, headaches, and sore arm. There weren't any other major side effects. Could it make aplastic? Could it cause problems with aplastic anemia? We don't know. The problem with these kind of phase 3 studies is they're predominantly, at the moment, looking at mainly Caucasian people so far between the age of 18 to, say, I think 55. They've recently expanded that to people certainly above the age of 60. And they're trying to get people from different ethnic backgrounds. But you're right, we don't know how well would it work in people whose immune system doesn't work that well. So we don't know. And in terms of could it cause problems in aplastic anemia, again, I don't know. I think at that time, it will be a decision about risk benefit. So whilst the risk of serious coronavirus in children, including aplastic anemia, is small, there's still a potential serious risk. And so my instincts would be in aplastic anemia to go ahead with that vaccine as per the normal schedule of vaccines. So, for example, you wouldn't be able to have it immediately after transplant, for example. Based upon the risk-benefit ratio, how well it would work and any potential side effects in people whose immune system doesn't work as well, I don't know. We just don't know. I think we have to hope that the vast majority of the population will take up the vaccine and then get this thing that we were talking about earlier in the year called herd immunity. And then that will protect those who are immune compromised to such a degree that for whatever reason they can't have the vaccine. So timescales, just to reiterate, I don't think any of us know, we're all praying for it. The earliest is at the end of this year. Who's going to get it first is also unclear. I think frontline healthcare workers are supposed to be first. If you're shielded, I don't know if you'll be second, but I think healthcare workers are supposed to be first. What are the risks? I think the risks are like most vaccines: fever, headaches, arm pain, etc. Would it? Yeah, I think certainly for adults, you'd be guided by what the adult cases say, the adult consultants say, so no problems with that. I think for the children, providing you've gone out of that phase where you're unable to have vaccines, for example, because of transplant and things, I think most of us would say we should have it. There is a theoretical concern about vaccines in aplastic anemia, and that's because of the lack of evidence. A long time ago, some people felt there were problems with giving vaccines in aplastic anemia, but that's not something that we've seen in children. And post-transplant, certainly we've been giving vaccinations, and I recommend vaccines to my children on cephalosporin as well. So I think on the risk-benefit ratio, as and when it comes out, certainly for children, for most of them, we'll be recommending it. And hopefully, if the vast majority of the population take it, there will also be, you'd hope, some degree of herd immunity. That's a long answer to quite a complex question.
Thank you. That was a really valuable answer, though, and it is something that comes up so often amongst our patient group, I think, in different ways, conversations about vaccines and COVID.
I just saw some questions about not having B cells and things. You're right. So if you don't have B cells, you probably may not be able to make an immune response. So certainly if you don't have the normal immune system, particularly if you're post-transplant, it may not work.